Auburn is not a place, it is a people. The loveliest village on the plains is more than a college sports venue, more than a university filled with historic buildings, more than a quaint little southern town. Its worth lies within its people, those that call Auburn home, whether that be for a single day at a time or for a lifetime. Much like our legendary Toomer's oak trees, our stories are the product of a firm foundation laid in the beginning of our Auburn story. These are the stories of the Auburn family. These are their roots.
Warrior Auburn family, and welcome back to another edition of Auburn Roots. This is our journey of exploring and sharing the stories of your Auburn family members. This is episode 28, and I'm very excited to bring in a guest that I have gotten to know over the past few years, vicariously through a member here of the E2C network. And, you know, you get an appreciation for some of these guys that volunteer with us by getting to know the family that they were raised in, and that is where their heritage and their Auburn fandom comes from. So we're going to actually take a look at that today by speaking to Mr. Rob Richardson. He is the father of AJ Richardson. Many of you will know him from the No Huddle podcast here on the E2C network, and he's been on some other ones as well here. And AJ's episode, believe it or not, will be coming up in the nearest future, but we're going to let his dad get the jump on him and get his episode done first. So, Rob, thank you so much for being willing to share your Auburn roots.
It is my pleasure to join you this evening, and War Eagle to everybody.
War Eagle to you as well. And, you know, you got to give me this first. What's it like to be the father of one AJ Richardson, if you had to put it into a nutshell?
Well, it's an honor. Certainly one of the biggest Auburn fans, Auburn graduate that I know, and I would like to think that I was part of his indoctrination into the Auburn family, and certainly enjoyed going to games with him when he was growing up, and even to this past Saturday at A-Day, him joining us was a great joy. He's a wonderful Christian man, husband. One day he's going to give me a grandchild. But he's a fantastic firstborn leader.
AJ, no pressure, buddy. But you've heard it here first. I think he's ready for some grandchildren. He wants some more Auburn family members to start indoctrinating. And I love that you brought that up already. Some people will view it as indoctrination, maybe from the other side of the fan base, but it's just, you know, it's in our blood. We can't deny it, right? We're just born to be Auburn family members.
Very true.
So what I want to do with you, Rob, to start off with, as we do everybody, let me ask you this question first. Why Auburn? In the fact of, why do you continually choose to be an Auburn fan? Because let's be honest, there are thousands of universities out there. There are thousands of other sports teams out there to attach yourself to. But if you could just, in a general sense, tell me why you choose Auburn every single day, why would that be?
I would say family, and not just the Auburn family is usually talked about, but my parents were Auburn fans. Two of my uncles, Auburn grads, and so it seemed to be meant to be. Sometimes
it's hard to break from history, but sometimes we're thankful of that because we end up in the best possible situation being part of the Auburn family. And I'm not shocked that it goes back deep into your family's history.
But unfortunately, it started with being born in some little college town in West Alabama called Tuscaloosa. So an auspicious beginning.
I had a feeling we were going to get to that part of it, and you kind of already outed yourself a little bit. So you started your life off in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Give me a little bit of a perspective of what it's like. Leave the Auburn part of it out, but, you know, just living in Tuscaloosa, describe that from your perspective growing up during that time.
Well, it was an interesting beginning, but my parents were very wise, and we moved from Tuscaloosa at a very young age. So we moved from there to Montgomery, which was a much more Auburn-friendly place.
It is very much. Do you think that Montgomery's pretty split down the middle, or do you think it still favors one side or the other?
Growing up, it seemed to lean Alabama, though many of my friends were Auburn fans. We went to Auburn games. You tend to hang out with those who believe like you do. But certainly there were a lot of Alabama fans, and certainly have a large number of friends who pull for that other team. But as AJ will learn one day, at some point in life, you have to realize you got to move on from some of the real fiery hatred. So,
are you saying AJ hasn't learned that yet?
If you want to keep your job and stuff like that. So when you have clients who are, of the other persuasion, and if you marry into a family that pulls for that other team in majority, you learn to get along. But you got to stand up for your team.
You do. You definitely do. I think it's a balancing act that you learn as time goes on. I can, speak from my own life. There was a time I was pretty fiery myself. I'll be honest with you, I've never thought of AJ as fiery in terms of being an Auburn fan. Passionate, yes, but fiery. So to hear you kind of vocalize that, I need to work on pulling that out of him more so I can see the fiery side of him.
If you watch a game with he and I, you'll see the fire.
Well, we'll probably have to set that up in the near future so I can witness that. I'm sure you can help bring it out of him just so that we can sit there and get it on videotape and show the world, oh, look, he's got Langston in there. All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about you. Growing up in Tuscaloosa, you moved to Montgomery, so you literally went from a place where it is unheard of to be an Auburn fan to a place that's probably, as you described, and I would agree, a little bit more friendly in that sense. How much time did you spend in Montgomery?
All of my growing up years before heading to Auburn as a freshman. My parents were both from West Georgia, Columbus and LaGrange, which was pretty friendly Auburn territory as well. Part of the Plains, as I would call it.
Part of the Plains. So when you're growing up during this time, growing in your Auburn fandom, was there ever a moment or a time where you considered another team, another school, or was it always the orange and blue?
Well, interesting story. Although my dad and mom grew up in West Georgia, the company he was working for while he was putting himself through school wanted to start a warehouse up in the Midwest in Chicago, and said, hey, we want you to move up there and run this warehouse, and maybe you can find a place to go to college while you're there and finish out your college years. So he was fortunate enough to go to college and graduate from Northwestern University, which is kind of the Vanderbilt of the Midwest, very prestigious as far as academics. So he just happened into that and graduated from Northwestern. Although Northwestern's been fairly good recently, when he was there in the late 50s, early 60s, they had a coach named Ara Parsegian, who was a very famous, won a couple of national championships at Notre Dame. But before he went to Notre Dame, he coached Northwestern, and they had great teams back then. So they went and, remember them talking about going to road games at Minnesota and Wisconsin and Michigan and such in the snow. So quite a different experience than being at Auburn.
It really brings the old saying of I used to walk 5 miles in the snow to reality, doesn't it? When they actually had to back up in that part of the world. And I have some family members that are up in the Midwest region in Wisconsin, so I'm very familiar with those type of stories. But I've not heard of someone having a connection, obviously, with Auburn, but also with Northwestern as well. It's not, you hear a lot of Auburn, Georgia. You hear a lot of Auburn, Alabama. You might even hear an Auburn, Florida thrown in there, or Tennessee. But an Auburn Northwestern connection in terms of just, family ties, that's a bit of a unique one. How does that Northwestern roots for you compare to being an Auburn fan? Is it a lot different, or how does that work for you?
I would just say it was interesting. Gave us another team to pull for. Although Northwestern in most years didn't have a great football team, but have as of recently, and I particularly enjoyed the bowl games in 2010 and also this last one in 2021 when Auburn and Northwestern played each other in pretty tight games. So Auburn won the first one, Northwestern unfortunately won the last one. So you can tell who I was pulling for.
I was going to say, I'm glad you threw in the unfortunately part of that. I understand having your loyalty and your family ties, and you might feel a little bit pulled, in both directions. But I'm glad to see that where you truly, truly, truly lie. And I didn't have any questions on that. But when you hear these things like family ties, for instance, when I mentioned Wisconsin, I have an affinity for the Wisconsin Badgers, but I will never, ever pull for them over Auburn. It seems like you and I agree on that standpoint as well.
Absolutely.
Would you ever considered going to Northwestern?
I did not. And when I was a senior in high school in Montgomery, I had kind of a short list, and Northwestern was briefly on there until Dad realized, much like tuition at Vanderbilt, tuition at Northwestern is astronomical. So he made it very clear that I was to pick an in-state public university, and there was only one of those to choose from, and that was Auburn.
Absolutely. That other place, we don't even consider that as an option. I'll never forget when I first got my first flyer in for Alabama. I just slid it across the table into the trash can, didn't even look at it for half a second. But really unique that you've got those family ties to Northwestern. And, I think you would probably know this, but Auburn and Northwestern share a little bit of history themselves in terms of uniforms. The Northwestern stripes that Auburn boasts on their uniforms obviously come from Northwestern. Were you aware of that?
Absolutely. And I've got a little bit of Northwestern garb that I wear, and it is the same. The stripe on Auburn's uniform is called the Northwestern stripe. And if you'll notice, even this past A-Day, many of the games, the grounds crew at Jordan-Hare Stadium also cut the grass in a way that it's got a Northwestern stripe on there. So,
see, I didn't even catch that. So that's a great find by you. And since you've got those ties back to Northwestern, you would definitely notice something like that. I think what we need to arrange for you one day, I don't know, have you talked to Clint Richardson before? Or do you know Clint Richardson?
I have. We actually saw each other at the, in Tampa at the bowl game a couple of years ago.
We definitely need to get you two together someday just talking about Northwestern stripes, because we did a podcast with each other one time. I think we spent probably 30 minutes talking about Northwestern stripes. The dude will take one, object on a uniform and just unravel it in a good way and explain everything, little nuance about it. So I'm glad you two have had a chance to meet. And I think we will actually probably be hearing from him very soon here on Auburn Roots as well. There's no relation though to the Richardsons and you. It's very common.
No, we would adopt him, but
oh, that's so nice.
We appreciate all he does and cataloging every Auburn uniform there's ever been.
Absolutely. All right, before we talk about when you actually get to Auburn, give me a little bit more about growing up during this era as a child, as an adolescent in Auburn sports fandom. What do you remember? What are some moments that stick out to you?
Sure. Particularly Iron Bowls growing up. I remember being frustrated at times when Dad and Mom would get to go to the Iron Bowl when I was younger, and there wouldn't be a ticket for me. And I particularly remember the 1972 Iron Bowl. They went to the game with my uncle, who's an Auburn grad, and aunt. And so I got stuck at my cousin's house, their son, and we watched part of the Iron Bowl game in 1972. Auburn got down a couple of touchdowns, and one of the cousins said, "Hey, let's go out in the yard and play, pick up football." And so we went outside and started a great football matchup there. And at some point, my cousin's wife came to the front door and yelled at us out in the yard and, "Come in, you got to see this." And it was right as the first punt was blocked by Auburn, returned for a touchdown. And then we got to watch the rest of the game, the infamous punt, Bama punt matchup. And see Auburn win 17-16 in a game that was, that was the first time Auburn had beaten Alabama in quite some time. So that was a really huge deal.
That's one that comes up a lot. It's a very special game, obviously for the whole of the Auburn family. But you know what strikes me, and I'm very happy to hear this echoed in your story, because I've heard it, I think, even mentioned here on this series once before. So many people that weren't able to actually go to that game, and there seems to be a common theme: parents leaving their kids behind to go to this epic game. But spending time with your family, as you talked about at the very beginning when we asked you why Auburn, it goes back just beyond the Auburn family itself, but back to a family type of thing. You'll always have those memories of spending it with your family and, running back inside to see that moment live on television. Now, I'm sure you would have loved to have been in the stadium. Who wouldn't have? It's kind of the same thing of would have loved to have been there for the kick six for a lot of people. But you'll always have those memories of sharing that with your cousins and knowing what it felt like to rush into that living room and share in that passion and that celebration together. And I can imagine there was a lot of relief for you as an Auburn fan in that era after losing for so many years.
Very much. It was much easier to go to school the next week and, get to boast, have bragging rights for the next year. And there were some years like that and others that were more difficult. So
what other big moments in sports or anything during this growing up period of your life for Auburn that stick out to you?
Sure. We went to most of the home football games in at least my junior high and high school years, and became a huge fan. I remember even being in the stadium the first game. The first upper deck was built at Jordan-Hare Stadium, and that was exciting. There was, always the fanfare of tailgating and Tiger Walk and the marching band and cheerleaders, but the game was the focal point. So win or lose, our family was all in. I was an only child, so I got drugged to most of those early on, but learned to love that and be a part of the Auburn sports family from early on. We had season tickets to football games as well as the basketball games, which was, more numerous than the football games. So that was a great aversion to be able to go to those games at night.
So you've literally seen, big time different eras for Auburn football and basketball, from obviously now to back what you were talking about in the 70s and around that time frame. If you had to try to compare the two different eras for the Auburn fandom, the Auburn family, what's different about it compared to back then versus now? Or is there any difference?
There's a lot of continuity as far as family, and, we support Auburn win or lose. I remember Iron Bowls where we left triumphant, and at Legion Field that was, supposedly split half and half. Usually there were more Alabama fans who stuck in there. And so, but, if we happened to lose, it was War Eagle anyway. And we held our heads high, and we always knew that the teams left it all on the field. I remember the Suge Jordan era at in the early years. And we had a neighbor, Carl Stevens, who's Richard Stevens' dad. Richard grew up with him, and Carl Stevens was local sportscaster, but also the stadium announcer at Jordan-Hare Stadium, as well as the PA announcer at Memorial Coliseum at the time for basketball games as well. He also did the Auburn football review on Sunday. So I always focused on that, and he would break down the plays and talk about the individual players, and that really got me interested in Auburn and the game.
Yeah, I learned that from you recently when we were we met on campus, that you guys were friends of the Stevens family, and we've actually talked to Richard here on Auburn Roots a couple episodes back. I think it was episode 626 or something like that, but not too long ago that we spoke to him and talked a little bit about his dad and things like that. Did you ever felt like you had the inside track to what was really going on in Auburn, having that big of a figure there?
Well, of course they knew, never got to meet Coach Jordan, but they would talk about it as a family of, just a great Southern gentleman, a tough football coach, and a great example for us to follow. But I remember particularly at Auburn basketball games when we would go as a teenager and would have opportunities to at halftime during a break in the action go down and tap Carl Stevens on the shoulder, and he'd be studying the stats from the first half, and sometimes he would point out things, but he was always very generous and friendly to us neighborhood kids that pulled for Auburn.
Yeah, that was a special relationship that developed between Mr. Stevens and Coach Jordan, and we look back at those times very fondly, not just because of the big moments, but because of the people. And those are two very special people in Auburn history that we'll always remember. So happy that you guys got to have a little bit of a more intimate relationship and get to know them a little bit better. It's a cool little connection there within the Auburn family. I want to talk about now, you arrive on campus. Tell me when that is. What is Rob's plan for college at Auburn?
Well, it was really great in that in high school, I had several friends who were a year older than me that preceded me to Auburn. So I felt like I already had a great group of friends there and surrounded myself with others through the Baptist Student Union, then the Baptist Campus Ministries, and was kind of our fraternity of the time. And even had a good friend growing up who had walked on to the Auburn football team and, had some tie-ins with some of his friends as he tried his best to make it as an offensive guard in the SEC, which was a big step up from high school. But that was a great opportunity. So I started in 1982, much like our son, AJ, had a great era of Auburn football to enjoy from 1982 to 1986 with the likes of Bo Jackson and Lionel Little Train James, Steve Wallace, and Al Del Greco and Brent Fullwood, and the whole crowd of the burgeoning Pat Dye era, which was very successful, as we know.
Yes, it's quite a pantheon of names that you just mentioned there. That I'm sure, obviously, there are some that are super familiar, some that are still very familiar to us when we look back in Auburn lore. That era is becoming what I feel like is almost this generation Shug Jordan era. I felt like I was kind of right there in between, where obviously I appreciate Coach Jordan and what he means to the Auburn family, but there's almost this, I don't want to say like favoritism towards the Pat Dyer, because he really was the rejuvenation for the Auburn family in a way. And what he brought in, obviously his hand in bringing Bo Jackson, and obviously everything that he was as a sports figure, not just an Auburn player, but a sports figure. It was such a unique, rejuvenating time. And I'm very jealous that you got to start your time at Auburn at the very beginning of this whole thing and witness it. So, I know it's a very general question to ask, but what is that like, watching Bo Jackson on the field, on campus? What's that like?
Definitely one of the greatest athletes of all time. And, to be there on campus at the same time and, actually see him in class. He was Bo Jackson, many people might not know, was I think he was an early childhood education major or something. And so you would walk along the concourse there, and there was one of the buildings right off Haley Center that had a playground on it, and you'd see Bo out there playing with little kids and just kind of be amazed. But, much like the 1972 Iron Bowl that really broke a long string of Iron Bowl losses, the 1982 season which ended in Bo over the top. Auburn was 9-3 that year and ended Alabama's 9-game streak in the Iron Bowl. We went on to beat Boston College, I believe, which was quarterbacked by Doug Flutie, who was famous at the time in Orlando, and I got to go to that game as well. So it was a fantastic start. And of course, Coach Pat Dye was really coming into his own at that point.
Yeah, he definitely was the beginning of his era and had many more years to come. And I am sure that you enjoyed watching what was the beginning of one of the greatest eras of Auburn athletics in general, but definitely football, because, you're here in not the same amount of time, but, Charles Barkley had just come through. Bo Jackson's in his heyday. The Big Hurt's going to be coming through here. A lot of people I hear these days say the 80s were the greatest decade. In terms of Auburn sports, there's probably a good case to make there, at least in terms of individual athletes that are there. Did you ever get to go watch Bo Jackson play any baseball games while you were there?
I did. We went two or three times, and he was just, as everybody has seen through his pro career, just a freakish athlete. He could run track, play baseball. He could probably compete on the equiestrian team. So
I've got a really funny image in my head now, thinking of him on the back of a horse. Thank you for that.
Maybe not. But the year after that, 1983, people may not remember that as well. After Bo on the over the top in 82 was an 11-1 season by Auburn, the first Southeastern Conference title by Auburn since 1957, which was also a big national championship year. We went on to beat Michigan in the Superdome in the Sugar Bowl. Probably should have been national championship. Should have had a national championship then. But just a fantastic year. And then I think my last 2 years we were 8-4-ish, something like that. But won bowl games. Of course, senior year was momentous because Bo Jackson just had an incredible year, won the Heisman Trophy. It was heartbreaking as an Auburn senior to lose your last Iron Bowl to a last-second field goal. But anyway, that was those things happened. But fantastic to see Bo win the Heisman. I remember being in a final exam in the College of Business when the Heisman Trophy was announced, and so we're sitting there trying to make our way through a final exam, which was probably one of the toughest ones I'd ever took in my Auburn career. And you hear people outside the building on the concourse just yelling and screaming and horns honking, and we all knew Bo was the favorite, and he brought the Heisman home to Auburn, which was a big deal.
I can only imagine what that was like being on campus during that time. There's something about, the small town, small university. And I get that Auburn is not small compared to some other universities out there, but, just the unique celebrations that have in such a close knit community, it would have been something really incredible to experience there. And you're in a very select group that witnessed the beginning and the end during your time at Auburn of Bo Jackson. And you are one of the very few and the very luckies that literally got to do life with him in essence in college. You got to see him playing with little kids, and that's another funny image in my head there as well.
And I actually got to reconnect with Bo while AJ was a student at Auburn, our oldest son, and it was dorm move-in day, and so we're walking down the concourse and see Bo, like all the rest of us parents, carrying boxes of stuff for our student, and he had come down. I think he lived in Chicago at the time. It was moving his daughter into the dorm at Auburn, carrying her boxes, which he was very capable of doing. But I thought that was a very humble, real dad that Bo was.
Yeah,
and then had the opportunity later on. The company I've worked for 35 years had Bo come in and speak to a bunch of clients one day, and was interesting to see all he's done in the business world as well.
You literally have just done life with Bo. Y'all can't get away from each other. You may not know each other like super well or anything like that, but the fact that y'all were in school at the same time, you're sending kids to college at Auburn at the same time, business, connections there. You've been a very lucky man to be able to cross paths with one Bo Jackson as much as you have. Hey, Auburn fans, I want to take a quick timeout from this episode to bring your attention to something very special. Here at the E2C Network, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best content for Auburn fans out there. And best of all, it's free to you. But just because it's free doesn't mean there aren't costs, especially when you have a library of hundreds of podcasts, videos, blogs, and more. Many of you have reached out and asked how you can support this network in the past. Well, now I have your answer. It's called the E2C Network Booster Club over at patreon.com/E2C Network. There you'll find a membership monthly reward system where you can sign up for as little as $1 and get different perks at different tiers. Some of those perks include things such as apparel, eligibility to join us on future podcasts, recognition as an E2C Network booster, exclusive communications, and bonus content that is available nowhere else. If you love this network and want to help us keep producing podcasts like this one, please head on over to patreon.com/E2C Network to join the E2C Network Booster Club. You can also get there by going to our website, e2cnetwork.com/support. Whether you decide to join or not, we are still so appreciative that you would support us by just listening and being here, because each and every one of you is part of our E2C Network family. Well, that's it. Timeout's over. Let's get back into the episode. Let me go back a little bit more to your time specifically at Auburn, and maybe you mentioned it a little bit, the College of Business. Is that what you came to Auburn to study, or did you change majors, or how did that work out for you?
Nope, it was College of Business all the way. Majored in finance and ended up in banking for all the years since. But it's a little different world from Louder Hall and the graduate business building meccas that they have now. We were in a little more decrepit Thatch Hall and Titchener Hall back then, but still a great business education, and wouldn't trade it for anything.
So what are some of the harder courses that you took during that tract at Auburn?
Well, that one I mentioned, that I was in the final exam when Bo won the announced for the Heisman Trophy, was a course called Utility Finance. And of course, the calculuses and the finance and accounting courses were all difficult, and extremely indebted to friends of mine who went through.
Yeah. Sometimes it's the friends that get us through all of that stuff. the tough courses, the tough times, where you're going at college. Speaking of, and I'm sure you got involved at some things on campus other than academics and other than sports. What was campus life like for you while at Auburn outside of those things?
Sure. It was, surrounded with friends. My roommate all 4 years was in the Auburn marching band, so I got to know quite a few people through that. And Richard Stevens, that you met, was in the Auburn University marching band, and then friends through the BSU and church as well. But I remember very well the free movies at Langdon Hall. Who we've now had three kids who have either graduated for Auburn, and our youngest is a junior now. They don't remember the free movies, but that was a big deal on campus. And certainly going to the old ice cream place in town, the Santa Freeze, or Santa Flush as we called it, the Flush, was a great time, as well as parties around campus with friends was always fantastic. But it generally all centered, everybody coalesced around the student section in football games, which was every bit as electric then as it is now, as well as the basketball games and the baseball games. Basketball games at the old Memorial Coliseum, and we would stand up the whole game, much like the jungle in Auburn Arena now, and we had much to much to cheer for in those years in the basketball realm as well. As we had Charles Barkley and Chuck Person and Gerald White and Frank Ford and Jeff Moore and all those guys, who was a very successful era of Auburn basketball as well. But campus life was fantastic. Started, and I always lived off campus, which I regretted that I didn't live in the dorm when I was there, but lived off campus in a garage, which had 7-foot ceilings, and it was a little tiny room that had a tiny little kitchenette, and would walk across Ag Hill and Funchess Hall toward Haley Center and the rest of campus whole freshman year. So felt like I was on campus, even though we were just across College Street there, where the old Heart of Auburn Hotel, and one of my favorite restaurant spots in Auburn was the Barbecue House. So I was situated in a little garage apartment right next to the Barbecue House.
You're bringing back some hurt feelings here. The fact that Barbecue House is not there anymore.
I'm with you, brother.
Oh man, there were some good mornings leaving Funchess Hall, going over there to get a little late breakfast, and boy, could they cook up a good breakfast. Now, there are plenty of great places to eat any meal in Auburn, but there was something special about some of those little places. You mentioned the Santa Flush Freeze. I hear about this thing so much from so many different people of different eras. What was the big thing with the Santa Freeze? Like, why is this the thing that everybody keeps talking about?
I think it was just a hangout. It was something everybody did. Certainly it's certainly warm in the South, so anything cool was a big win. I don't remember the ice cream being that great, but kind of along the lines of a Dairy Queen maybe. But it was a very rustic, bad paint job, old, decrepit building that probably may not have met all the health codes and all that good stuff, but it was a fantastic place to hang out.
See, that's the way I described the original Mama Goldbergs to people. I said, look, you can go to one of the chain stores and get the food's still going to be good, but there's something about, and it's going to be gross, I'm sorry, but the musty smell of that place, that when you walk in there, it just seeps into all the food and stuff like that, and there's something that just is different about it. So sounds like that was the way for the Santa Flush. You kind of recognize probably isn't the best place in terms of health codes and things like that. Might need a touch of cleaning, could be used here, but hey, we have those memories. We have those moments that we hold so dear there. And so I always just you get a little chuckle whenever I hear the Santa Flush /freeze/ whatever you want to call it brought up, because it is a staple of that time and period at Auburn that so many people talk about for them on campus or off of campus. So you said you wish that you had been on campus for a year. Why is that?
Well, there's something about the camaraderie. Like I said, I was blessed to have several high school friends who were a year older than me that went to Auburn, and I had that good set of friends when I got there. But, for our kids that have gone to Auburn in later years, being in the dorm was a good opportunity to meet other people and have that kind of community in Auburn. But then I moved from the garage apartment to something that was quite common back in the day, and lived in a lovely mobile home the last 3 years, which could be very hot in the summer and very cold in the winter.
It was basically a roof with 4 walls and a bathroom and a kitchen, maybe.
a tin can. It was plenty of room, and it was blessed to have a place to live. So
do you think it was
its purpose?
Do you think it was probably a better situation than some of those dorm rooms, though?
Oh, I do, as far as space wise. And we backed up to we had a little pond on one side. We had a farm behind us, which was great, except on the weekends when the rooster would wake you up.
And see, that right there, lends itself to so many, the barn jokes from the Alabama fans. And
very true.
We understand our roots, though, and there is a very ag-based feel. It's a state school, so it was built off of land grant, and there's a little bit of heritage to that history of just coming up from nothing. And I think that builds itself into the Auburn story. because we were the ones that were, the second thought of all the time. And sometimes it makes it all the more special when we get to the highest points because we come from such hardworking, humble, blue-collar beginnings. And obviously, times have changed, and we're a much more wide and diverse family of all different backgrounds and lifestyles now. But I think at its core, everyone who's a part of the Auburn family connects with what you described there. A rooster clucking as you live in the mobile home trying to get ready to go to school. And maybe, just maybe, there's your version of Bo Jackson off in the distance. Is there anything from your college experience we haven't talked about that you'd like to share before we move on?
Certainly basketball was a big deal. I grew up in Montgomery with a neighbor on one side of us who was had been on an SEC basketball championship team at some other school in West Alabama back in his day. He was older, claimed to have been a roommate of one Coach Bear Bryant. And on the other side, I had a neighbor who was also basketball oriented, who helped coach women's basketball at University of Tennessee back way in the day. He claimed when women's basketball only played half court. So I loved basketball growing up. That was my sport, and grew up listening on the radio in my early years to Auburn games on the road, the ones that we couldn't go to on campus. So enjoyed those radio broadcasts and how those broadcasters painted a great picture and pulling for Auburn at home and away. We used to have to sneak into my parents' room, and that was the only radio in the house. And so when they got ready for me to be out of there, I'd have to miss the end of the game sometime. But we certainly enjoyed having season tickets to the home games and seeing those. So had a great basketball heritage as well, and attended most of the Auburn home basketball games during my teenage years through the Dr. Coach Bob Davis days. And then Sonny Smith came to coach the team right before I went to campus. Even had a tie-in with Coach Cliff Ellis when we lived in Mobile. For several years, he coached the University of South Alabama basketball team, and so we enjoyed watching them. And then he goes to Auburn to coach, which I was very excited about it. And wow, the Bruce Pearl era, that's fantastic.
You've literally just seen the ups and downs and the much varied history. I noticed that you didn't mention one Tony Barbee in that. I
did not. I was glad to be not attending many games during that period of time.
Hey, count yourself lucky. I had to. It was not fun.
Yeah.
Anyways, nothing about me complaining here is necessary for this episode here, but you do have a very long and storied history with Auburn basketball, and it's a sport that ironically gets not forgotten, but a little bit pushed to the side because of how great football was in that time. But people forget how great Auburn's basketball heritage is outside of, obviously we think of Sonny Smith, we think of Chuck Persons, we think of Charles Barkley's, but it goes much deeper and wider than that as well. Well, you have a very unique experience and story at the university, as many people do. Very briefly, let's talk about life after when you specifically graduated in 1986, correct?
That's correct.
And with a business degree, you go into the banking world, you get married, you have a couple of kids. What's life as an Auburn fan like during this time of your life? Has it changed much? Have you calmed down a little bit? Are you not as ferocious as I forget what you described AJ as maybe rabid? How has that changed, or is anything different for you these days?
Well, I started out working in Montgomery briefly, and then went to work for a bank in Birmingham. Birmingham at the time was heavily an Alabama fan town, so that was a little difficult to start with. But we had some success on the field and the court to help that out. And then, married into, as I mentioned earlier, a lifelong Alabama fan. I wouldn't call her a rabid fan, but some in the family are. And so that was made for some interesting family gatherings. But everybody is very amiable and kind of takes it in stride. Then we moved to Mobile, I mentioned, and that was tough in the Auburn journey, in that we were that much farther away from the Plains. So there were a few less attending Auburn games at that point. Although I do remember one in particular. I think it was when Bo Nix's father, Patrick Nix, came in to the Iron Bowl and in kind of a precarious situation. The starting quarterback, Stan White, had gone down. It was a tight game, and the whole stadium really felt like, oh, this is going to be bad. Your starting quarterback goes down with a knee injury, and unproven Patrick Nix comes in and almost immediately throws to the famous touchdown pass to Frank Sanders to score a touchdown to keep us in the game, and we ended up winning that one in the end. And I had the privilege of attending that particular Iron Bowl in Auburn with a former Auburn player, Bob Sherling, who was a friend of ours in Mobile, and we won the game, celebrated with all the fans, went outside Jordan-Hare Stadium and walked by where the Alabama team buses were loading up, and Bob Sherling, former Auburn player who I was with, saw a coach, an assistant coach for Alabama that he knew. Some of you may know Coach Brother Bill Oliver, and they caught eyes. And Brother Oliver was one of those unusual coaches. He coached some at Auburn and some at Alabama. So he had coached Bob when he played at Auburn. Now he's coaching an assistant coach at Alabama at that point. So we had a really great conversation after the Iron Bowl because Auburn won that one.
So if you had to pin down your time out of college to now, some of the best Auburn sports memories that you've either been at or witnessed, or even if you weren't at the games and just experienced, in unique ways, what would you say if you had to kind of pigeonhole those unique experiences or great moments in Auburn sports stuff for yourself during that time?
Sure. I mentioned the 17-16 Bama punt. That was certainly a big one. And then, I remember the night being at the 1989 Iron Bowl, which was the first one physically at Jordan-Hare Stadium, the first Iron Bowl at Auburn. And that just, the stadium was electric. We came away with a big win, and that was very huge. I mentioned the 1993 game where we went 11-0 that season. Coach Terry Bowden had his one season heyday as coach, and the Patrick Nix to Frank Sanders right before halftime, and that was a fantastic memory. And then, of course, much like other Auburn fans, the 2010 season was magical with the national championship. Some of our family got to go to Tuscaloosa to the Iron Bowl that year, and of course we're down big at halftime. The Cam Newton and crew bring us back to win at the end in Tuscaloosa. And I mentioned our family. It was a great opportunity after the game as we're leaving the stadium in Tuscaloosa, and we're all celebrating. Most of the population there in Tuscaloosa are hanging their heads. And we ran into a goodly portion of my in-laws and that side of the family, and they all just rolled their eyes and looked at us and walked the other way.
One time they don't want to be associated with you.
But that was quite interesting. And then being in Jordan-Hare Stadium with the family for the prayer at Jordan-Hare and getting to witness the kick six win in the Iron Bowl at Auburn was huge. On the basketball side, I remember my birthday's in January, so it usually revolved, and does to this day, being at an Auburn basketball game to celebrate. And that year, in I think it was 1998, 99, something like that, I attended the Auburn, Alabama basketball game, really excited, there to celebrate the birthday. And it was the famous one where Auburn beat Alabama 94-40. So Auburn won by 54 points at Memorial Coliseum in Auburn. And I remember very vividly seeing Alabama coach Mark Gottfried got up from his seat sitting with the players. He walked over kind of towards the scorer's table, sat up on top of it, and just crossed his arms in front of him and smirked the rest of the game. He just didn't move for about another 5 minutes. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. And but beating Alabama by 54 points was quite a spectacle. And many other times where we beat Alabama, or the few times we would beat Kentucky as a student or in later on, that was very special. Also, I don't want to forget one memory of being on campus. There was there still is a cafeteria in the Foy Union building, but the War Eagle cafeteria was there, and one of the few places to eat on campus. So there was a bunch of us friends who would meet there and at a certain group of tables every day for lunch. And so we're in there, and there's a commotion. We hear a commotion on the other side of the War Eagle cafeteria, and we see Coach Sonny Smith and Charles Barkley coming in. They come over and climb up on top of our lunch table at War Eagle cafeteria to, much like Bruce Pearl, Coach Sonny Smith was a great marketing salesperson, and he hopped up on the table and, encouraged all the students to be at that night's big basketball game. And Charles Barkley spoke a few words, but just seeing them stand up on your table and get the student body excited was quite a good memory. But many great memories from the A-Day game this last Saturday was great. Just being back on campus and seeing fans after the pandemic yelling, hearing the band, and we will look forward to this fall and, Lord willing, having a full stadium and the band and the eagle flying and the tiger walk and all of those traditions will be fantastic. And then to have the current basketball team be able to enjoy a full Auburn arena and the jungle rocking was going to be fantastic.
I started this question with what have you done or what have you experienced? The question I should ask is what haven't you done or what haven't you experienced? Because literally you just ran through every marquee game, marquee moment. I mean, you even got to witness Sonny Smith and Charles Barkley how did that table hold Charles Barkley? I mean,
he was the round mound of rebound. So I'm wondering, apparently they engineered things better back then because it did. And we all just cleared our cafeteria trays away, made room for them, and enjoyed the moment.
Those are always unique moments that you'll remember. Sometimes it's not even the big sports moments, but it's those little things like Charles Barkley standing on your table, almost stepping in your mashed potatoes that you'll always remember from your time at Auburn. Well, how about this? I love everything that you've shared here. I think it would be appropriate now for us to move into the final questionnaire for you. And kind of get a good perspective about some of these little fun nuances of what it means to be an Auburn family member, what you think about them. Are you ready for that?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. So these are the not so rapid fire questions. I say not so rapid fire because usually there's some explanation that needs to go for it. Either I ask for it or you might need to feel the need to do it. We'll start right here. We have 12 questions to get through. Question number 1, orange or blue?
You can probably tell by my attire today. I'm an orange guy.
Do you think you look better in orange, or
I
is it
blue too? Orange is distinctive as long as it's true Auburn orange, not Tennessee orange, not Texas orange. It took Bruce Pearl a little while to figure that out, but he's all Auburn orange now.
Yeah, he had the what we'll call the puke orange for a little bit, or the pale.
He had to use the wardrobe he had.
Yeah, he had to take a little bit of time to accessorize the best he could with the proper attire of orange built into there. Question 2, Aubie or War Eagle?
I'm going to go with War Eagle. When I was at Auburn, they actually had the eagle lived in an aviary in a big, huge cage near the concourse near Haley Center. And, anytime you passed by there, if you weren't late for a class, you went by and were in awe of the War Eagle there. And that was very special. Although Aubie, which began as an animated character, actually debuted as the mascot right before my Auburn years, and so that was a big deal as well. But I'd have to go with the War Eagle.
It's a solid choice. I can't guarantee that you're safe from the minions of Aubie, but hey, War Eagle is obviously a good choice there as well. Question 3: your favorite line, word, phrase within the Auburn fight song. What would that be?
How about a tip of the hat to your podcast network? Ever to Conquer has to be one of them.
I will take that tip of the hat and accept it, sir. It is a good one, though. It's why we chose it for the name of the network to go, because we just felt like it's a very hearty way to describe what we do here. Always ever to conquer. Question 4: your favorite Auburn athletics program. What sports program? You had to pick one and only one forever and ever. What would it be?
I think it's got to be football. We're a football school, although basketball has always been one of my favorite sports. So it's a kind of a 1A, 1B, football and basketball.
It's fair. It's hard for people to break away from the football thing. It's understandably so. But I just feel like one day we're going to get that Auburn volleyball fan on here that just picks Auburn volleyball. Let's see. Question 5: your favorite Auburn athlete of all time.
I guess I'd have to go Bo Jackson with that one, just because he was a true athlete. Could run over people in football, or run around them, or over them and bow over the top, and certainly an amazing baseball player as well. It was certainly a tragedy when he got injured as a professional. He would have had likely a long career in both the NFL and Major League Baseball.
We don't argue very much with anybody whether Bo Jackson was probably the greatest athlete of all time, but he could have proven that had he not got injured. That's the most frustrating thing about that, is his greatness was taken away from him far too soon.
I actually made the trip when Auburn played at the University of Texas, which was a big deal. Texas, big football school too, and Bo got hurt in that game and sort of sealed our fate that day. But save injuries, he was quite amazing.
One of the most unique players in Auburn history, but one of the most unique athletes in the entire world. Question 6: your favorite Auburn coach of all time.
I probably got an interesting choice there, maybe. I would say Coach Sonny Smith, and certainly enjoyed watching him coach Auburn. Have also enjoyed him being the color analyst on the basketball broadcast to date. Certainly knows his schemes, his offenses and defense, but a colorful character, and gotta be my favorite Auburn Roots podcast you've had.
Well, thank you for plugging that. Yes, that was episode 15 would have been when we interviewed him on his roots, and a little connective tissue here between him and yours, because I even think he talked about jumping up on the table at the lunchroom. If I remember correctly, he either shared that live on the episode or just privately to me, because I remember him talking about it. So now
I believe he did, and I thought, that was my table.
I was thinking, now to have it all connect back together, it's kind of funny now. But yes, you can go back and listen to that one, episode 15, if you'd like. It was a great conversation with him. Coach Sonny Smith, great pick. Question 7 for you: your favorite Auburn non-athletics person. So a little clarification on this. This can be really anybody outside of the athletic program. So no coaches, no players, no athletic directors, but a family member, a professor, a friend, someone. When I think of Auburn, I think of this person.
Well, I'd have to go with our kids who've been Auburn students as number one, and certainly the college friends from my days there that are near and dear still. And, one plug for this coming football season, we've got a group of us that have kept up with each other since our days at Auburn. And we've made plans at times to try to go to games together. And we've had circled on our calendar wanting to make the trip to the Auburn Penn State game in State College, Pennsylvania this fall in September. And one of our dear friends has cancer, recurring cancer, and we still have that date circled, even though there's radiation and chemo in the picture right now. Praying that we have that opportunity to all go together to cheer on the Tigers in Happy Valley up at Penn State this fall.
I would imagine that is giving them something to fight for and something to look forward to continue to push on through all of that's going on there, because that is going to be a unique experience. I was hoping to be there myself. I don't know that it's going to work out for me, but I will be very jealous of you if you're sitting in the stands in Happy Valley for Auburn versus Penn State. That's going to be quite the matchup at the start of the season. Question 8, your favorite Auburn building on, off campus, can be any of that.
Timbers has to be one of those. Think of weird ones being Haley Center and the monolith as it is. Something that made Haley Center tolerable and was one of my favorite buildings at the time was back in the 80s. You could still go up to what we call the Eagle's Nest at the very top, above the, basically on the roof was a glassed in area, and would go up there to clear my brain or to study or to enjoy the view of campus. So even though it's not a very attractive building architecturally, it was a great place as far as the view.
When the nuclear war hits us, there will be two things left: the cockroaches and Haley Center. I'm convinced of it, because it'll stand the test of time. And here's the sad part: the cockroaches will get stuck in it and be lost because they can't find their way around either, along with the other people that got lost.
Which quad were we in?
Quad? Who said there was a quad here? Oh, it's one of those buildings I think we'll always miss, should it ever go away. But we'll, obviously probably think back of the things we love to despise about it as much as we loved about it. It's definitely one that Auburn family members will never forget. Question 9, your favorite Auburn place to eat? Present, past.
Well, we've already discussed, traditionally it probably would have been the barbecue house, which is no longer there just because it was right next to where I lived, and didn't have a great budget for eating out, which just seems to be different than students today. But that was definitely a go-to, and unbelievable amount of great restaurants that Auburn offers today, from barbecue to fine dining. So great spot there in Auburn, Opelika.
For sure. If you can't find a place to eat in Auburn for whatever you want, I can't help you. I mean, it is literally like a little plethora of dining options out there. Everything from your standard McDonald's to your, like you said, fine dining, Amsterdam, all that kind of stuff. It's there if you need it. So good. It shouldn't be a hard time for you to find somewhere to eat. Question 10, your favorite Auburn tradition. This can be a sports tradition, a non-sports tradition, or even something really obscure and personal to you, but your favorite Auburn tradition.
I would say certainly it's got to be, in the era where there's been live eagle flights. Like I said, going back to the day where the eagle was basically just on display in the aviary off the concourse, to seeing that great raptor fly free through the stadium to the chants of War Eagle, down into the middle of the field, and a exciting game is a tradition second to none in my mind.
It's hard to beat that one, isn't it? It's really hard to top that in terms of sports. I don't think there's anybody that's come to visit Auburn, even as a non-Auburn fan, that hasn't been radically changed by it. I think even one person said, I have been to Auburn and I have seen the mecca of college football simply because of the War Eagle flight. Question 11, your favorite Auburn memory. Any Auburn memory that you have. When I think of Auburn, I think of this memory.
There's so many, Kyle.
I know, but that's why I'm pushing to pin it down on one.
It's hard to nail down. I guess I would have to go back to the kick six game, which was back and forth. Huge Iron Bowl game. Our whole family was there, either in the student section or seated with us. And the celebration afterwards with, seeing our kids out on the field celebrating with the players. And that was just tremendous, knowing it was it'd been kind of a magical season, which, led to up to the national championship game.
You see, in the general sense, I'm not shocked that you picked the kick six. But then, after hearing your story and everything that you experienced, again, my question should have been, what haven't you experienced? I'm surprised that you didn't pick some of those back at the thing. But then I think back to what you said at the beginning of this episode. It's about the Auburn family. But for me, especially more specifically, it's about my Auburn family. And the fact that you shared that spectacular moment, arguably, and I will fight anybody tooth and nail on this, the best college, if not sports moment of all time with your family. And then, of course, with your extended Auburn family. It makes sense with the way you've kind of shaped your Auburn roots for us, why that would be your favorite Auburn memory. Final question. Describe Auburn to me in one word other than family.
Boy, you're making it difficult.
It's my job.
I would say it feels like home. I would choose the word home. It always felt comfortable. I had relatives that attended there, who had roots there. I graduated there. Our kids have been there. We've talked about maybe down the road retiring there. I would call it home.
It's not an uncommon theme that I think at least one time in everybody's life that calls himself a member of the Auburn family doesn't think, could I ever do it? Could I end up back there? So I'd love to see you guys back there in Auburn, creating some more memories for you and the Richardson family. It has been great walking through your Auburn roots and your Auburn story with you, Rob, and I'm very appreciative of you sharing that with us today. As you sign off with us, if you had anything final that you wanted to say to your Auburn family, what would it be?
I would say a big War Eagle, and again, looking forward to full stadiums, full arenas, all of the Auburn family being back together and in full force. Got a new football coaching staff, great momentum in all of the sports, and just being back together will be fantastic.
Absolutely.
So, War Eagle, everybody.
War Eagle, it's always better when we're together as the Auburn family. Thank you, Rob, again for being here. Thank you for the listeners for tuning in for episode 28 of Auburn Roots. There'll be many more episodes to come, and we thank you for listening. Until we talk to you again, War Eagle.